Oh, I got it. Being live streamed. Perfect.
All right, Matthew. So, hi, everyone. Today is February 14th. We're actually launching our first conversation for Tuesday Talks. So, Matt and I decided to do this Tuesday Talk conversation every other Tuesday, just to really provide as much value as we possibly can, and really just to talk about anything that you guys want to talk about. So first and foremost, I just highly recommend if there's a certain topic that you want us to speak about, please just write it into that group inside the Inspire Your Greatness Within community page. Any topic, and the most common topics that we receive, we'll just go ahead and actually make that as part of our agenda going forward every other Tuesday. So again, our goal here is to provide as much value as we possibly can and share our journey and really share what we know and what we've learned along the way. So for our first Tuesday talk, what a better way to kick it off than talk about relationships, especially because today is Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day, right? When we go into talking about relationship, it goes way further than just husband and wife or, a romantic relationship. And yet that's what we're going to kind of focus on for today. So with that said, Matt, today's Valentine's Day, we're going to kick off talking about relationships. This is specific to romance relationships. So you don't have to be married. You don't have, none of that, but just in regards to romance. So let's kick it off.
Yeah. Happy Valentine's Day. This is so exciting. We just happened to go out for a quick lunch and we were telling a story about today, 20 years ago, was the first time that we expressed, I love you. And it was funny because going back to that moment, I know that that's very specific in your mind as far as that memory was concerned. Same thing for me. And it was funny talking about that experience in the sense of, I had written out a card and in that card it said, I love you. So as far as me giving you that card, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm going to tell this girl I love her in a card. And how's this going to go? And then we were talking about from the other side where you did the exact same thing, where you're giving me a card that said, I love you. And it was this like, holy moly, how is this whole thing going to go down? And listen, for anyone that's out there, I'm very, very sentimental. We're laughing because the very first thing not the very first thing, but I remember one of the first gifts Yun had given me was this Bruins sweatshirt. And I keep a lot of things that I don't necessarily need to hold on to. And when the shirt got ripped to pieces, I was like, I can't give this up. Like that was the first Bruins sweatshirt that Yun gave me. Huge Bruins fan. And literally one of my assistants from a couple of years ago, I did this video of like ripping the shirt off. It was when the Bruins lost in the Stanley Cup. And I'm like, it's hard to say goodbye. And it's funny because I threw the sweatshirt in the trash. Well, a couple months later for Christmas, what shows up is this like shadow box with the Bruins, the ripped Bruins sweatshirt in it. So it's been an amazing ride looking at the past 20 years. And as we talk about relationships, of course, there's so many different types of relationships, whether it's business or friendship or romance. I'm very, very blessed because we started our relationship in a business relationship. And then from there, it flourished into all different types of things. And I'm in story mode today. So I'm laughing about how most people that know me know the story that I was not interested in you when we first met inside of the sales company that, we were a part of. I grew feelings for you, and anyone that wants to develop a thick skin, go door to door, whether it's business to business or it's residential. Yes. Like you want to learn how to like protect your attitude and just learn to deal with different personalities. Like go do that. I dealt with a lot of rejection. I got a really thick skin. But my thickest skin that was built was by asking you out over and over and over again. And usually I keep tallies on things, but I don't know. It was probably like 750,000 times that I asked you out and you had said no. And as a little joke, you always say to me, I don't even remember this, but you refreshed my memory in saying, I guess I made a statement like, I don't want to marry you. I just want to take you out. And that was true. That was true. So at the time, I just wanted to go on a date with you, and look where it has ended.
I know. What an amazing journey just to reflect back on, but just something to really highlight when we talk about relationships. Matt, I think one of the things that I think about and that I feel so blessed about is that not only are we going on 20 plus years of a relationship, really entering into our 18 years of marriage. And just like you said, we started off working together. So we had a business relationship and I'm almost like a coach and mentor relationship starting off, right? And then it turned into a romantic relationship. And then it turned into business partners and then romance and then all of that. And guys, just so that you guys are aware, for probably about 15 years of the beginning of our relationship, we spent every minute together. Like, think about that. For about 15 years, Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week, we were together all the time. And I remember even like 10 years into our marriage, and I said, Matt, we've actually spent more time with each other than other people might have, even 50 years married, right? That's amount of time. So one of the things I just want to say is, I got to tell you, I think we've been through so much together, which is really one of the reasons why we feel so comfortable talking about it, because we've literally learned so much. It hasn't always been roses and, roses and rainbows and butterflies and sunshines. We had a lot of challenges that came our way, whether it was, us just really focusing on our marriage, whether it was, us focusing on as parents or business partners, whatever it was, we've put on so many different hats in our relationship. And I just got to say, one of the things, again, going back to, we're about to hit 18 years of our marriage. And I can really safely say that I feel stronger in our relationship today more than ever before, right? And again, it required work. It was a lot of work. But if you can recall back, and I'm just going to throw it out there, being husband and wife, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to growing our relationship or being in a relationship and really, developing and growing what we have today?
Well, it's an awesome question. And it really, I don't know if this answers the question, but one of the things, and you'll laugh when you hear this, and I haven't talked about this with you in a while. Do you remember your mom's advice when we were first together? What was that advice?
Well, that nobody's perfect. My daughter's not perfect, right? But I'm sure you remember it much more. But it really is that nobody's perfect. And it really boils down to that we have to do the work, right? We have to do the work to love and accept each other.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing and it's funny because it brings me back to that day where your mother wasn't necessarily saying that you weren't perfect. She was giving relationship advice, and they've had a very successful marriage, same type of thing. I mean, we followed really close in their footsteps, right? As far as working in the dry cleaning industry, being with each other all the time, sharing a vehicle, sharing a cell phone. Who'd have thunk that, right? Well, besides the aspect that she would said of nobody's perfect, in her broken English was always understand each other. And that really, that is probably for me, that was such a critical, those two pieces of information, what an amazing foundation, not just for, hey, Kimmy, not just as far as, us going into a personal relationship or romantic, whatever, a dating relationship, but just with anything. And, now understanding energy and understanding this whole world. Well, the idea of nobody's perfect, yes, each one of us lives in our own silo. Each one of us is the star of our own show. Each one of us has our own goals that we want to accomplish and our own genius that we bring to the table. And so the idea of accepting of nobody's perfect, you know what, each one of us always has, and not just you and I, but in general, everyone has room for growth. And, as of late, we've been talking about the fact when someone feels that they've kind of figured it out or they don't need it today, that's when people need it the most. So understanding, neither one of us are perfect. We're going to make mistakes. And the idea of always understanding each other. Now, I kind of got that message when she said it, but now it means a whole nother thing. And it really speaks to the fact, Jan, of some of the friction we had over the years as far as not being on the same page. And it's because I don't, and I'm going to stand up here and say, I didn't really understand myself. So I wasn't really able to understand you. I kind of had that passive, hey, she's not perfect, everything's fine. But to come from a standpoint of, again, perception and putting yourself in that other person's shoes of how are they interpreting this? And I think that's what is so important of being vulnerable with each other, being honest with each other. I don't want to paint, a broad stroke with this, but I'm going to label most of my gender of not kind of jumping up and down, talking about their emotions. Right. And my gender doesn't typically, we, because of the image that we want to uphold, we don't want to be vulnerable. We want to kind of, hey, I'm the man, I'm going to bang my chest. Well, I think it's really important that for the relationship to work, I have to know who I am and I have to understand how I operate. And you have to understand who you are and how you operate. And then once we understand ourselves, then we can bring this together and lock arms and say, okay, let's go at this together. We were in that dry cleaning, I was going to say industry, but we were in that dry cleaning business for quite a bit of time. And I remember so many conversations of people saying like, how do you guys do it? It was like, how do we do what? Like, how do you spend time with each other like this? Like, how are you together always? And you're still smiling. And I always felt so blessed that we had that. And then the other thing that got me so like, oh my gosh, was people that their spouses were retiring and we're like, oh, you must be so excited to, your husband's going to be home or your wife's going to be home. And the spouse was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. What do you mean? Well, now he/she is going to be there all the time. Like, what is that going to look like? So for me, in full disclosure, I come from a broken, household, if you will. My parents were divorced and, we're in a world now that we're very aware of paradigms and past programs that control us. And listen, your mom was on the money when she had concerns as far as okay, listen, Matt's coming in with a set of expectations of there's some divorces going on. And when things get tough, you kind of break it and go. And you opened up this call talking about putting the work in. And it really is making that choice of when does love begin? When do we show each other love? Is it at the end of the night, when we're giving each other a kiss, going to bed, okay, hey, I love you? No. Focusing on giving love throughout the entire day. And it starts off with, it could be that little thing of you making a cup of coffee for me, right? I was going to say picking up my outfits, but that's kind of weird. I'm not 4 years old, but yeah, you picked up my outfit in the past. I'm just, I'm now I'm going to start grasping for air of different examples. It could be anything as far as you making the bed, right? Showing me, as far as love is concerned. So I think that's something that we've had a good acknowledgement of, showing each other love throughout the entire day, not just at the very end, or just kind of being very intentional about that.
This is completely on a tangent, but I'm just going to share with everybody. So Matt just celebrated his 50th birthday. And one of the things that I did do for his birthday was I surprised him with a vacation. It was actually a Sedona Solar Ventures plug, by the way, which was an amazing company. We went out to Sedona. I surprised him on a trip, and we went and met with all these practitioners and learned a lot about ourselves and about each other. And we were really there to strengthen our relationship individually and together. And it was such an amazing time. But I just want to hit upon something that we met with one of the practitioners, and it was all about sensual relationships, right? And one of the things that she says, and I just want to pose that question to you guys that are in a relationship to really ask that question. Because a lot of times when we think about sensual, we actually go into sexuality, think about the actual sex and all of this intimacy, and which, by the way, intimacy is another word that I want to hone in on, but we think of the actual physical sexual thing, right? When in actuality, so think about this. And she proposed this question, which I thought it was so amazing. What would it look like if 23 hours of the day was actually foreplay? Ooh, right? First and foremost, ask yourself that. What would it look like if 23 hours of the day was your foreplay? What would you like to see it happen, and how, and what would that look like? And most importantly, I think this is the second most important, if not the first most important. Does your partner know? And if they don't know, is it their fault that they don't show up in the way that you want them to show up? Right. And I'm going to share this. So many times I think I went in and I'm like, oh, my insecurities showed up in our relationships, especially at the beginning. My insecurities of the baggage that I brought with me, am I good enough? How, whatever it is, the jealousy feelings, oh my God, anytime something picked up, I really saw my insecurities show up in an egotistical way. it never showed up like in an ego, like, oh, are we gonna, what's our relationship? It always showed up in like some form of an argument where I got defensive and I wanted to, I got mad or whatever the case is. And throughout our relationship, I think one of the biggest things that has helped us just in general was, just like you said, showing love throughout the day and also understanding that we're two separate individuals, right? For example, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, when something upsets us and we get into an argument, I want things resolved right away, right? So if something shows up, like I want to discuss it, I want to squash it, I want to create a solution for it and then move on. Matt, on the other hand, how do you like to handle it, Matt? I don't want to speak for you, but how do you handle it usually?
Well, my personality and this thing from the Enneagram that we just started studying from the Soul Adventures, I'm all about giving love. And by always wanting to give love, I am not a big fan of confrontation. So when confrontation arises, I need to be on my terms to understand how I'm going to strategically, present this and present my side of the story. That is, it's not a this, it's a this, right? Almost like you're chasing, and we just talked about this at lunchtime, as far as some of the arguments we got into where I want to flee so I don't, mentally say the wrong thing or blow up, and say the wrong thing. Again, I want to make sure, I'm the peacekeeper. I want to keep everything okay. So I don't want to go off, shoot off the hip. I want things a little more calculated because, and I don't even like saying this, but I'm very concerned about making sure that people around me feel safe and they feel comfortable. So that's very interesting as far as, if you really look at it, it's completely opposite approaches to it. And it can be confusing. And that's one of the things that we learned as far as each one of our styles, we need to, or we're going to work towards this conscious awareness, this level of awareness that when I want to flee, that's when I need to stop and say, okay, you know what, let me step into this a little bit, even though it's uncomfortable. And same thing for you. You want to come right at it and get to the root of it. Well, you're going to learn to kind of just back off a little bit to let it, so that we're both, again, compromising, and it's got to be one of those things, or any type of relationship is a give or take. And if we're just going and taking, that's not positive. If we're just giving, that's not positive. So it's got to be, let's just go to the concept of energy. It's got to be an equal energy exchange. There's a karma has to do with everything. So it's so important. But that was a huge thing. And you brought up this word intimacy, and I kind of made this joke like this. One of the things I learned about myself just a couple of weeks ago was about everything. However, what I learned is when I'm asked something point blank, my personality looks at that as a conflict of like, whoa. You can't, ask me that. So before we started that little adventure, you had said, let's talk about intimacy. And you had asked me, you said, in your opinion, what is intimacy? And sometimes questions come in and they'll go right away. Sometimes questions come in and I intentionally, push them to the side. And this one, the question came in and I know sometimes you're like, hello, did you hear me? Or, can you stop, figuring out 17 different answers before you pick one? Well, I intentionally deflected that one. And I was like, yeah, check out the weather. That wasn't what I did, but I didn't want to answer the question. The reason I didn't want to answer the question was because what my idea of being intimate was, I wasn't showing up that way. And it really was like a big pill for me to swallow, as far as like sharing sharing all my thoughts, sharing all my emotions. It kind of goes back to my core wound of like, do I really want to tell Yum that? Like, does that really even matter? It does matter. It does matter. Anything that's coming through my mind that I want to express, I need to express that. Everyone has to have that. So this idea of intimacy comes up, and I shade, I kind of hide from it. Then I go on this walk on the land, and we start talking about intimacy. And the practitioner I was with, this guy Jay, says, the word intimacy for me is into me I see. And I was like, huh. And what I realized, John, and this is not just like get on the stage here and just kind of spill this, I realized I'm not 100% intimate into the relationship because I'm not 100% intimate with myself. And I'm doing this inner work as far as the acceptance of myself. I'm working on my inner child. I'm working on all these things because I desire to be able to share all those things. And that's the one thing is each one of us has a balance of male and female energy. It has nothing to do with being physically male or physically female. It's an operating style. And it's one of those things that the ego side of the male, like I said at the beginning of the call, like I got to bang my chest, like I'm the king of the jungle. And like that's a lion, not a gorilla, banging the chest. But that's the whole thing of like, there's a certain image that is expected of men. Now, of course, each generation kind of loosens that up a little bit, and I think now we're in a situation that, men don't know what they're doing. Women don't know what they're doing. Like where everyone's like, what is happening here? And everyone just love each other, get along. It'll be fine. There's no expectations of how we're supposed to show up. But it's one of those things like you got to break those societal paradigms as far as how someone's supposed to show up or what someone expects you to show up.
Right. And really focus on the intimate relationship within the two that's in the relationship, right? What matters most. It's one of those things that it's because you don't know what you don't know until you become aware and you start realizing and start putting the dots together. And yet I think of all the small little arguments we used to get into all the time and emotions that we used to suppress because we just didn't want to deal with it, whether we were just running ragged, working so many hours, or we just didn't want to deal with each other, conversations. I mean, we've been through those moments. And yet when I really sit back and think back to how much we've grown, the biggest thing is that not only did we start learning about ourselves, but we really started giving each other grace and really wanting each other to, how do I say this? Like, for example, even when we get into little tips now or contrast shows up, like, that I have a need that I want to discuss things right away. I also know that you like to process information. So I don't know if you've noticed the patterns over time, but it's almost like we fulfill both of those needs. When something comes up, we have a small conversation about it, which satisfy my needs, which doesn't fully fulfill it because there's more that I want to talk about, but yet I know you need to process it. So we have a small conversation and then whatever happens, and then we revisit to really find the solution. And I mean, this kind of quote unquote system came about just because at the end of the day, both you and I desired just better communication. Both you and I desired a closer relationship, right? So at the end of the day, the most important thing I think we need to focus back on into relationships in general, and I'm so glad that we're bringing this topic up because I really think it has to be a highlight for people individually, relationships back on loving themselves and loving on the relationships that they're actually pouring into, right? Or maybe not pouring into, but they want a different type of relationship, right? Well, it's kind of funny. And one of the things that I want to hit upon is if you think about it, and we say this all the time, that everything exists twice. It actually exists in someone's imagination first, and then it comes into reality, right? But how many people actually spend the energy into talking about what they want their relationship to look like? How many people actually sit and talk about what they want their family life to look like? Right? And once they actually can get a vision in their mind and kind of experience what that feeling would feel like, then they're actually going to get closer to actually executing and taking inspired action towards that, right? It blows my mind. And I was there. So I'll just say it, just to throw myself under the bus. It was so easy and natural for me to be able to think and envision what I wanted my future to look like when it came to my career or businesses or jobs or whatever it was. When it came to like a career or a business aspect of it, it became very easy and natural. What I didn't realize is I never put that image with our family. Right? Like I never knew to take the same concept that we all do for business, right? Especially entrepreneurs out there, if you guys are listening, or anybody that's a 1099, like whatever it is, we put our energy and we literally focus on what we want that to look like, right? We set goals, all of these stuff, but you never do that for the things that are most important, right? Which is your home life. And I truly believe once we started putting energy to that, it literally started to move even more rapid, more closer to it. And I don't know if you're noticing it, Matt, but like things are happening so quickly in our household and between our relationships that, just like anything else, you hit a ceiling, right? Which is exactly when we start feeling that staleness in our relationship, or we start seeing contrast shows up or conflict shows up, right? And it starts to show up because now it's time for us to create another script. What's our next thing that we can focus on together as husband and wife? You know?
Yeah, it's so true, and I think that's where, we're raised in a system, or we're trained in a system that, we follow a certain path. And the idea of being able to create the lifestyle that you want, get the results that you want. Like you said, a lot of people could be okay with how things are going and say, I would like it to be better. Again, what is the intention and what is the focus to actually make that happen? And it's one of those things like, any of the results that we have, we can change. And I think it's funny because when you talk about kind of hitting that ceiling or that plateau, most of the time, my feeling on that is one of us is out of alignment, or one of us is kind of off that path, right? And then and that's where the breakthrough comes through is, again, this is a team. We went through, some people know this story, but we went through a good chunk of our relationship where it was all about you. And I thought that I was playing the great role of being a great husband of like, my life is going to be dedicated towards my wife. And it sounds amazing and it's fantastic. It's like, oh, that's a great thing to be. It's not because my spirit, my genius needs to express. So I think that's the other thing is with a relationship that, with two people is giving each other that freedom, giving each other that support, and letting each other know that I'm here, whatever you want to do, I'm here for you. As high as you want to go, I am here for you. And, you made the comment earlier in the call, and this was a big one for us. I think that, I remember crying my eyes out to you, and I'm like, I don't know what I deserve. I can't, why do I deserve you? But, we just hit this weird time of things. And then you turn around, you start crying to me, and you're like, how do I deserve you? And it was the exact same thing. And then all of a sudden, the kind of what, we each took a mask off. And, at that point in time, we're looking at each other like, you're pointing to me being like, I can't believe you feel that way. And I'm pointing at you being like, I can't believe you feel that way. So we're existing in the same world, the same pattern, but we weren't honest with each other to come onto the same page to be able to move forward on that. And it's been amazing that we've been able to work through that. And it's, again, not that I'm perfect with it, but speaking my mind, speaking my piece, right? And understanding that, and this is just my personal mantra, like people have information that they want, and people have information or I have information that people want to hear, and I have information that people need. And that's why I'm very, for me, being vulnerable, talking about past experiences and then how they were overcome, that gives people, I hope it gives people an idea of, hey, you know what? I was in that situation, or I'm in that situation. I can break through that, right? I'm in a marriage right now that things are okay. They're kind of ho-hum. What is it that you want? Mentally
100%.
create that, right?
And then have those conversations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, find the tools to help empower that relationship to really, really take that to the next level, to make that result come into fruition. Absolutely. Because like you said, that first thought, the first time it's created is in the mind. Then there's things we need to do to bring it to physical existence.
Right. So in the last 2 minutes of this call, just a couple of things that I want to recap, right? And I just want to hone in on, what is that statement that the grass is never greener on the other side, or the diamond is under, what is it?
The grass is always greener on the other side, right? No, that's the thought process, yeah, right? But that's right. But really, the grass is only green where you water it. So
this is exactly what I want. Exactly, the grass is greener where you water it, and the acres of diamonds are usually right underneath you, right? And what I mean by that is, if you're having challenges in your relationship, the first thing that you want to do is look inside. Are you happy with yourself? Because if you're not happy with yourself, number one, your significant partner is usually going to be your biggest trigger. So let that sink in. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're in an off relationship that you should be in the relationship, but really check yourself in the sense of, am I happy with myself or am I really not happy with that other person? Because there are two things, because sometimes so many people, and I see this happen a lot, where they chase relationship or they discard it, they go to another one, but because they're not happy, they just keep recirculating the same relationship with different people all the time and really attracting the same thing. So really check within, number one. Number two, right? Have that image and have that conversation with your significant other. And then the last thing I just want to quickly wrap up with is, what are the three most important things that, you know, people can really focus on to really strengthen their relationship? And I will just state my three, and then I'll allow you to state your three. Is my three, number one, communication. Communication, and open lines of communication with no judgment, allowing your partner to speak without being defensive and really like listening, right? Second thing, time spent, quality time and quantity time spent, right? Because again, sometimes the quality shows up because of the quantity spent, right? But if we're not spending time with each other and we're not pouring into each other, then what happens to that relationship? And the third thing I think is really, for me, is really learning how to respond versus react, right? Like, I am different from you, and I'm going to allow you to express and allow things to happen. And then I want to respond to the situation versus reacting with certain programs that may not be serving our relationship or serving our relationship for the higher good. So those are my three that I'm going to stick with. Matt, I'm going to let you wrap it up with your three. And then that really wraps up our first Tuesday Talks. And again, for those of you guys that are listening, please let us know any other topics you want us to discuss, because we are a complete open book and we've learned so much along the way that we want to share with everyone. So go ahead, Matt.
All right. So I think for me, the first thing that pops into my mind as far as, and this is more of a, you know, a personal relationship or a marriage or dating or anything like that, going to bed, right? And I'm glad we kept this PG. And when I mean going to bed, it's don't go to bed angry, right? Like get that stuff off of your chest before you go to sleep, give each other a hug and a kiss, make sure that there's nothing hanging over that, because you know, go to bed like that, you're going to wake up like that. And, you know, that's just, you're ending your day on a bad note and you're starting your day on a bad note. And if you're anything like me, my old version of myself, you know, it festers overnight. And then, you know, I wake up and I'm even madder than I was the night before. Thank God I killed that version of myself. So going to bed happy and with a clean, you know, kind of a clean slate. The second thing I'll talk about is, as the one, you know, as you coming into the relationship, understanding what your self-worth is and that you deserve to be there, right? That's a really, really important thing that, you know, that as we start to, you know, when we're dating and we start to, you know, get serious, there's a reason that person is there with you, right? And so if you can eliminate the questions of yourself, then you're going to eliminate a lot of questions about the relationship, right? And there's not going to be that energy that's put out there. The last thing I'll say is just being, you know, staying in curiosity, and that could be in every aspect, right? You know, and it could be as simple of, you know, are you happy with this? Are you happy with this? Or what would you like? Or, you know, really opening up that can of worms. There's no conversation that should be left, you know, off the table, and just let it all out and discuss everything. And when you find out what your partner's needs are, most of the time they're going to want to know what your needs are. And then that's what this give and take is as far as the energy is concerned. So once we figure, hey, everything's great, we just clocked in, you know, 17 years of marriage, we don't have to figure anything else out. We have so much more to discover. And I agree with you, Yun. You know, we're both in that. It's really interesting to be in this phase right now that we've known each other for over 20 years. We're in a big time honeymoon phase right now, and I absolutely love it. It's so fun. It's so exciting. It's as you'd like to say, it's magical.
It is. So everybody, thank you for tuning in with us for our first Tuesday talk. I hope that you guys were able to find some value in this. Again, please, anything that you want us to talk about, any topics, please put it out there on our group community page. And again, happy Valentine's Day. Love on yourself, love on others, and just know relationships absolutely matters. And everything that you want requires work. All right. So put the work in, and the gifts that you receive becomes so amazing. And no matter how great it is, there's always room for better. Mwah! Have a magical day.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.